Thank you all for coming to tonight's celebration of painter Norm Siegel and his show-stopping exhibit, Visual Curiosities. I say show-stopping because our patrons and employees who might normally just walk by, they literally stop and do a double take when they pass it. And that includes me. I have to stop myself from straightening out tilt every time I come into this building, including tonight. Inspired by a school trip to the Metropolitan Museum as a kid, where he saw landscapes of Albert Bierstadt and a trompe-l'oeil painting by William Harnett, Norm knew he wanted to be an artist. After attending the High School of Industrial Arts, he went on to Cooper Union, then served in the Army, and eventually landed in the crazy, stress-filled world of advertising. After working as an art director in several Mad Men agencies, he and his partner, Steve Lance, opened their own shop in Southport, which gave Norm some breathing room to take up painting again. Norm draws inspiration from the many parts of his life, and he says that the advertising career seems to have meshed with his painting career. So just like creating an ad, what he paints has to start with a concept. His interest in aviation led him to join the American Society of Aviation Artists and the Air Force Art Program, and his aviation paintings have landed in the Pentagon and the Air and Space Museum. His love of 3D comics and movies as a kid led him to create his 3D paintings. Lunch with his friends led him to his series, You Are Where You Eat. And his love of books and magazines led to his coffee table book paintings and Life magazine covers that are so realistically rendered that people try to turn the pages. But no matter what the concept, Norm's humor and wit always shines through. Thanks to everyone who helps make this all possible, our fabulous art committee, Travis Spell, the audio engineer, and David Bibby, the video producer. A video of tonight's talk will be available on our website in a couple of days. And last but not least, a special thanks to Miggs Burroughs, our always engaging interviewer for the evening. Thanks.
Hello. Okay, we're on. Hi, Norm.
Hi there, Miggs.
Why did you ask me here? As you know, I do exhaustive research on my interviewees, and my first stop was the dictionary. If this is going to work, let's see. This is not working. It's on. Is it on? Okay, we'll try this. Okay. So my first stop was the dictionary. I looked on. I particularly like 5, a designated standard of average performance of people of a given age and background.
Touche, Miggs.
So how did you overcome the stigma of being Norm?
By hanging out with you.
Well, you hung out with some other people too. This goes way back. Now, this is going to be like a little quick contest. So can you find, this is Norm at his advertising agency. Can anyone identify which one is Norm?
This is in 1973.
Anyone have an idea of where Norm is? Which one? Well, no, I don't have a, the pointer doesn't work. Anyway, it's, I guess, sort of second row, the guy on the, with the tie and the beard and the mustache. Well, they all do, I guess. Above the guy with the bald head on the right. Yeah.
But ask them if they know who's standing behind me.
Oh, who's standing behind you? I don't know. Stan Freberg? I don't know. Who's
That, believe it or not, is Mo of the Three Stooges, his son.
His son? Really?
Yeah, Paul Howard.
Wow.
He had a red afro, and I told him when he was introduced to me and in my group, I hope I don't embarrass you, but you know, you look a lot like Mo Howard. And he grabbed me by the velvet suit I was wearing, and he pulled me into his office. He says, "I'm his son." He didn't say it happily.
And he didn't poke you in the eyes.
Yeah.
Right? Okay. Actually, so the first one piece we're gonna show is kind of a more serious subject, but it's an important one, and it's, I think, one of your most recent. Oh, I'm sorry, this is you in your studio. Just to give an idea of how we did thanks to Carol, who started this series of artists in residences during COVID, we interviewed artists in their residences, in their studios, and we did Norm. And he said, well, nobody can come here. There's only room for one person. Yeah. And this gives you a little idea. This is basically his whole studio, this compressed picture. So he works in this tiny little space, just to give you an idea, appreciate even more what he accomplishes there. But so anyway, this painting, you want to talk about this, the origin?
If you've watched TV and watch any news, you know that's the ambassador to the United States, Oksana Makarova, and the person on the other side of the painting is Ruslan Falkov. He's the advisor. I'm half Ukrainian, and right after the war started, I had this idea for a painting called The Garden of Hope. And I just sent him an email that I'd like to donate the painting, and I didn't hear anything for maybe 2 weeks, and I got an email from Ruslan that they would love it, and they would send me shipping instructions, and I had to go through a whole bunch of security things because they were getting a lot of packages that they didn't know what was in them. And he said, is there anything that you'd like? I said, I would just like to see a photograph of you and the ambassador holding the painting, which he did, and he sent it back to me. And I'm very proud of that picture, you know. And it's hanging on the wall somewhere in the embassy in Washington.
Mm. Yeah, I mean, it's amazing how you could take something so, you know, wrought with tragedy and whatnot and make it into something so, you know, beautiful and meaningful. So this is just a counterpoint to some of your wittier other things. The aviation, I think the first group here is in your aviation series. Was this prompted by anything? Was this?
Yeah, well, as I say in my bio, when I was on a high school trip to the Metropolitan, I saw a William Harnett painting called After the Hunt. And it literally blew me away because I thought it was real. And when I started painting for the ASAA, and I decided to do a updated version, and it's called After the Hunt, circa 1943. And I just imagined, instead of a goose and a bugle and a hunting rifle, I did the accoutrements of a pilot who flew out of England over Germany, and that's basically almost the same type of composition, and it's in homage to Harnett.
So I find it interesting as a couple of things. First of all, if you look at the Life magazine cover in the lower left here, we're 2 days away from the 80th anniversary of that date. It's just weird, which also happens to be the anniversary of Kennedy's assassination, November 22nd. And now you talked about this in our interview, there's a mistake.
Oh, yes. No, I'm very, very careful, and my wife and I were at what's called a turnover ceremony at Wright-Patterson, and the painting was right at the entrance to where you went in to have the banquet. And there was an old gentleman in a wheelchair sitting in front of the painting. And he was a B-17 pilot that was injured during World War II. And he was looking at basically to check if it was accurate. And he said to me, I know there's a mistake in here somewhere. And I said, it's impossible. I checked it out. And he said, well, for one, the Lucky Strike Pack was, during World War II, it was red and green. And I said, no, in 1943, the government paid Raymond Loewy, who was a designer, $100,000 to redesign the pack because all ink was petroleum-based, and they had to save the petroleum. So what he did was get rid of the green, and he got $100,000 for it. And when I left the bank with my wife, he said, I found your mistake. And I said, impossible. And if you notice the airmail letter envelope, it's sent to what is the guy in the picture on the right. And the return address, I used my wife's name and her address. And unfortunately, I put in the zip code. So much for hubris.
Well, the Chinese have an expression that I heard from an artist that they deliberately put imperfections in their work because they don't want to insult the gods. So that's your...
I wouldn't mind insulting anybody.
Now that's you. Is that you on the left?
That's me. When you get a job as an artist for the Air Force, you get a telephone call from the Pentagon, and they give you, are you free? And they give you like a couple of weeks down the road. And I said yes, and this was about 2010. And I get temporary orders, and I am a colonel for 2 weeks. I don't wear any insignia or anything like that, but they pay me a day rate that a colonel would make. And they sent me down to Barksdale Air Force Base in Shreveport, Louisiana. And we spent 1 week of training, and that is ejection seat, parachute training, and showing us a film of every way you can die in this plane. And you have to be really up on your toes because it is a huge 60-year-old bomber with 8 jet engines. And I was the oldest thing on the plane. The pilot was 27, the co-pilot was 25, and the weapons officer was a very attractive young lady, and her call sign was Charlie, and my call sign was Mo, in honor of Mo Howard, and I was with 2 other artists, Curly and Shem. And since I was the only guy with the video camera, I was given the jump seat right behind the pilot. And if we got into trouble and I had to eject, I had to disconnect my oxygen, my harness, and run to the seat that was about 10 feet away, and then go through the whole thing of arming and putting myself in so I can bail out. And I gave out. I said, if something happens, I'm going to ride this sucker down, And we were scheduled to go on one plane, but they couldn't get an engine started. And then one of the planes that did come in, we had what's called a hot start takeoff, meaning they left the engines running. We got on this plane, and it was very low on fuel. And as we got to 30,000 feet over Arkansas, they gave me some binoculars to keep an eye on civilian traffic in case we would collide. And one of the tankers that they had came from Alaska, believe it or not, with 80,000 pounds of fuel to join us to literally to refuel the plane. Now, I don't know if anybody has watched, Stanley Kubrick's Dr. Strangelove, and it begins with that beautiful refueling of a B-52 jet bomber, and the music is tenderly, and it's very sexual and very, very beautiful and romantic. Let me tell you, a refueling is not romantic, and it is not sexy. That poor pilot was literally doing this and sweating. You could see the steam coming off him. And I was looking back because we were disconnecting they had trouble holding the refueling boom into the receptacle, which was above my head, and they kept on disconnect. And if you notice the light, there's a green, 4 little green lights. That means that everything is clear to go, and when they turn red, that's when the boom is in the receptacle and you're getting fuel. It took an hour and a half to get enough fuel in that plane for us to complete a simulated bombing mission over Texas, which is very interesting when you hear over the intercom, you know, Stooges, are you okay? And we were okay, and we did it. And it was time to give the co-pilot his chance at the control, and he did what's called a touch and go, where you come down and take off again. And when that 8 engines go into afterburner, you could have as much ear protection as you want, but it is loud.
We're going to probably have to speed through some of these because we've got a lot of pictures. We've only gone through 2 or 3, so...
I'll talk less.
No, that's all right. Let me just, this is a reference shot from that, you know, that's a photograph.
That's the video.
A reference shot of you. And was this taken from, what battle was this, just briefly?
That's the sinking of the battleship Yamato, which was the biggest battleship built in World War II. It was Japanese. And I did this for the opening of the Intrepid Art Museum in New York, where it was on display for, I guess, a month.
It's amazing, the detail. This is, I think, is one of your most astounding, and I think you said it took you a year or more to do.
A year and a half. I did the roof twice.
Jeez. So, well, this applies to some of the book pictures too, but this is one art question I have to ask. So the lines, I mean, I don't understand how you do any of it, but in particular, the line, the pure, even lines, are they drawn in? Are they?
It's done with a stripper brush. If you ever seen, you know, car strippers, they put the designs on the side of a car. There was a guy in my very first job, which was for the Metal Lab Equipment Corporation. We would do the catalogs, and he would do, on the weekends, he would stripe and decorate cars.
Did you use one of those new
No, I use a stripper brush. They're very, very tiny, and you just bridge a rule. You have a ruler, and you put like little furniture cushions so it raises off the canvas, and you just go up and down. And then also for the curved lines, I get boat curves that they make that they use for when they're designing boats. So that's how you do it.
Unbelievable. I mean, this could be a whole...
It's great when you have OCD.
this could be a whole talk in itself. Well, that's, I guess, another reference.
I mean, this is how beautiful it is when you're doing it. That's the boom coming down. We were in daylight when we started, went to sunset, and then did it at night. And there are lights on the bottom of the tanker that the pilot can read and telling him what to do, because the turbulence behind the tanker is quite severe sometimes.
So here's a couple of these which my line question applies to this, because you do well, it doesn't show in this, but anyway, these are, what do you call it, faux book covers? I mean, people look at them, they try to open them, they're on canvas, right? They're painted on canvas?
Yeah, they're on.
Yeah, I mean, sure, you know, it's just...
this is Nina Bentley's favorite. The Alice in Wonderland.
It's astounding. And the other question I have, because, you know, as a graphic artist, I, you know, study or observe typography. So the lettering here, you know, I've seen paintings where people try to do the lettering on a cereal box or something, and it's crummy. They don't know what they're doing. I mean, they're just, but you have did you study typography, or is it, how did it?
Yeah, I studied it, but I worked in the bullpen in advertising, and we used to do comps before computers where you had to letter out the headlines.
Yeah.
I was so good at it, they kept me there for 6 years. And the interesting about this life cover is I was in the Army. That's my platoon sergeant on the left-hand side. And the title is It Could Have Been Me. It literally could have been me. And I got out of the Army right before it got very hot in Vietnam.
So this is the real cover that was on.
Yeah, it's a real cover. It was shot by a French photographer, Henri Huet, and the sergeant is Harry Bell, and he was a very, very close friend of mine, and he survived, and but a lot of the guys in my company did not.
And when I say real cover, this is Norm's painting of a real cover. This is not a picture of the cover. It's astounding. Anyway, this is, so is this a...
No, there was a publishing company that Jules Verne wrote his books for called Hetzel, and they made all these incredible covers. I just thought they were magnificent, and they were called Hetzel editions.
You were into sci-fi, obviously, too, right?
I moonlighted when I was at Cooper Union doing science fiction covers. Nobody knew.
Did you invent monsters? Did
Oh,
they
yeah.
tell you? Oh, you did?
Oh, yeah. Unfortunately, when I went into the Army, my mother and father decided to move to LA, and a lot of the paintings I had were destroyed. This I found on the internet. And what was also destroyed were 2 mint copies of the first Mad magazine.
Okay, these are great. This is a series of you with or friends, capturing friends eating. And this is, I know, Tony Angotti right away on site, but who's the other gentleman?
That's Jim Peretti. He's a filmmaker and shoots commercials. And when I was doing work on Discovery Channel, he shot a couple of commercials for me. And as you know, Anthony Angotti was a very well big art director. These are all buddies that I have lunch with occasionally. And we talk about how terrible advertising is and how great we were.
And of course, she's Nina
Magnificent Nina Bentley.
Yeah,
I don't know how she managed to eat all that food.
amazing.
And Steve Parton.
Yeah, your fellow artist. And
All these, except for the barn, a lot of the restaurants are now out of business, so it must have to do with the painting.
oh, yeah, right. You the curse of a Norm Siegel painting. Yeah.
My business partner, Steve Lance.
So when you're photographing them, right? Or
Well, I just happened to take the phone out, and
right.
he was really into that hamburger, and I just took a photograph. And
So
I said, what a hell of a painting it would make.
another quick question I have about, artists. I didn't do much of it in school, but life drawings and anatomy. And do you have to? Did you study all that, or is it just if you can see and have obviously the artistry, the talent, but is it just surface, or do you really have to know Steve's bone structure in his fingers?
It's the photograph makes.
Yeah. Okay. Okay.
To be honest, yeah, I studied anatomy and
Okay.
stuff like that, but when you put a shadow in, you want to know that the shadow you're putting in is not a artifact of some strange lighting.
Right.
Okay,
I love there's a couple. This is amazing. Is that your dog, Bodhi? Who's Bodhi?
No, this is a lady who's married to he's retired now. He's the international publisher of Time magazine, and they have nothing but hundreds of, not hundreds, but they have quite a few rescue dogs, and they asked me to do painting. And this was done about, I think, 2016, and oddly enough, just last week I got a call from her, and I'm now starting 2 more paintings of the dogs they got to replace these dogs. I love dogs. My wife loved dogs.
That's great. I mean, whatever. The eyes, everything was so amazing. This is my absolute favorite. I don't know, just the concept. I mean, you combine,
This is a sore spot for my wife and I. We've had 5 Springer Spaniels, and we actually have their collars at the foot of the bed, wrapped around the brass. And this is Maggie and Spencer. And, you know, dogs stick their heads out of windows of cars. Since I was into aviation, I figured they could do it with a plane, you know.
Probably could.
And it's Maggie and Spencer go for a ride.
It's just great. It's just captures their exuberance, you know, and it's got a tennis ball in his mouth, or is it a lime? I don't know what.
And that's our beloved Roxy, who really died at a very young age. She was hell on wheels, but great. Terrific personality.
Okay, so this is kind of a potpourri of interesting. There's one in the exhibit of a square, you know, a little square 12 by 12 painting that was so great because Norm entered it in a show that the Artist Collective does once a year, the 12 by 12 show, and everybody has to submit a 12 by 12 painting, and it was, so we hung it. Everyone except the people that hung it and received it and knew what it was about said, you know, that's backward, like that's backwards. You hung that's the wrong, I mean, it's astounding. So, and this has a similar.
That is now
But this is, you know.
owned by my ophthalmologist. Believe it or not, because I had cataract surgery about 2 months ago, and I said, here, and I brought it to her, and she was like thrilled. I mean, who else do you give it to, you know?
So have you ever, I can't imagine you haven't, but have you ever been asked seriously, with serious intent by somebody to forge a painting by a famous artist?
No, the first time I forged something was at the request, and it was a class lesson by teacher Sidney Delavante. And I did Honoré Daumier's third class carriage, but I just didn't copy it. People just were supposed to copy it for composition and technique, but I found the same kind of paper he used, the same kind of ink he did it. So if I was going to do a forgery, I could probably sell it for a few $100,000. And he was freaked out, and he asked to keep it, and he said, I could be very, very wealthy, but the last 20 years of my life would be in jail.
It's.
Oh, Danny.
Well, at least you've got it's that in your back pocket if you ever need it, you know.
Yeah. I'd have to ask my eye doctor.
And this, well, you tell me, but my first observation, of course, I'm drawn to the stitching, the detail, you know, there's such detail that pulls you in to make it.
This one I have to explain a little bit
please.
about. When I was in the Army, I was sort of an instructor, illustrator, and a weapons demonstrator. I was jack of all trades. Most of our company were sergeants and above, so I used to pull KP a lot. And I had a little bay with there like 2 bunk beds all to myself. And one day, our sergeant brought this guy in. He was 6'2". He had obviously just been wounded because there were metal fragments working their way to the surface of his skin, and this was during the Berlin Wall crisis. And his name tag said Murphy, and my name tag said Siegel. And he came in and looked at me and said, Siegel, you're a Yid, right? And I said, oh, this is going to be fun. Needless to say, he was the best man at my wedding. I was godfather to his kids. He's godfather to my son.
So what were you, from your point of view, what about him?
He had just passed away from PTSD.
Oh.
And I didn't know he had it. This was after he was wounded in Germany. A lot of people didn't know because the news wasn't as in your face as it is now, but there was skirmishes between the East Germans, the Russians, and the Americans during the Berlin Wall crisis. And this was in 1962. And when he died, I promised his wife to do a portrait of him, and I dug up the picture of him, and that's him.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very powerful, it's funny because it's not funny. I mean, it's...
He tried to get me to bail out of a plane on a parachute on Armed Forces Day. I told him I went to college. I don't do that.
No, I mean, it's a great kind of observation about art that the power, here's just fairly stoic portrait.
He was what's known as a man's man.
It conveys such strength and nobility and power. And so you've done a series. How many of these roller paintings have you done?
I only did 2. I try not to do the same painting more than once. But the first idea I had to do this was I had a dream of called a digital roller, where you could do it on a flat screen, which is stupid because you can buy a flat screen and program any painting you want. And so I called it Rembrandt Roller for the R and the alliteration of roller. But after I did it, Mona popped into my head. And I figured I got to do Mona Roller.
Mona Roller, yeah.
And that's the last roller painting.
Which is no, it's so clever. So what kind, I think that's the last one, but I wanted to ask you, what kind of kid were you? I mean, little kid, before you were an artist.
Believe it or not, I was a street kid in the South Bronx. And I was part of a gang called the Sabres.
The Sabres?
And we used to have fights with the
Jets?
next block. No, with the kids from Colgate Avenue. I lived on Evergreen Avenue. And we played stickball, and I was a regular kid.
I mean, these fights, was switchblades or just fists or what?
I made a zip gun once.
Did it? Zip gun?
Well, I have a working knowledge of guns, so
yeah.
I did that.
Well, you weren't in the military yet, but you were a kid. But how did you get?
I was brought up on a farm in the summer. My uncle was a gun runner.
Oh.
Did time in Rikers.
Good stock.
Basement was full of guns.
I think that, this one. I love this shell game. So this is another one. So you brought this, I think, was this a 12 by 12?
I guess John Lloyd is here.
So
Maybe
this,
not.
yeah, over there in the corner.
Susan Lloyd is a terrific shell artist. And one of her pieces, I just had this idea to do a thing called Shell Game, where I would paint the shells, but some of the shells would be real. And she would come in, we'd meet at the cafe, and she gave me the shells, and I did it, set it up, and the shell game. And Mike Brennicky will attest to this, because he hung the painting, that he didn't know that 3 of the shells were real.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, I was there when those were being hung, and it was like, oh, that's really cool. And then I think maybe Michael told me, he said, get up close to it. And I go, what? And then it's like, oh my, you'd have to get your nose this close to realize that 3 of them were real. That's phenomenal.
That's why it's called Shell Game.
Yeah. Which 3? I don't know. Can't tell from this, but I don't know. Do you remember which 3 they were?
No.
No? Okay.
Yeah, I can, actually.
Oh. So this is a picture of it's another great picture of your studio, how compressed it is and the working space.
That's the biggest painting I could fit to do it in my studio.
And it's a tribute to the Major League, to baseball, and they're on the subway.
It's called Subway Series.
Yeah, Subway Series. The Giants and the Dodgers and the...
Of course, when I was growing up, I could watch a baseball game. I can't watch it today because it's boring.
And it's interesting, these subways, that don't, that they were this green, military, what are this called? Olive drab or whatever. Beautiful. And this, oh, the story of this is great too, because you sold this to a person and
Well, Nina Bentley introduced me to a friend of hers who is married to a college roommate of hers, and his name was Richard Actus Grande. And at the Westport Collective, or Artist Collective of Westport, sometimes when we have our meetings, we bring in a painting for people to critique, along with a bottle of wine, some cookies, or potato chips. And I brought this painting in. I just had the idea to do it. And Nina had just introduced Richard to me, and he came over to me and said, "Is this for sale?" And I was really surprised, because I didn't think about putting a price on it. And I said, "Yeah." And I put a price on it, which was not inexpensive. And he said, "Let me think about it." And then he came over to me about 15 minutes later. He said, "I want to buy it." Well, he was walking with a cane, and he was like physically challenged. So I said, "Okay, Richard, give me your address. I'll bring it. I'll hang it for you." And he gave me an address, and I went over there, and he picked a spot where he wanted it on the wall. And I realized he was a major collector. He had incredible paintings in his house. And I was really sort of honored to be among those paintings. And I said, "Here, please hold this," while I banged the hook on the wall. And as he held it, he said, "Oh my God, they're painted." He did not know that within the frame is a painting, and the real ties are hanging from the back underneath. And it was funny.
I mean, that must be so rewarding to get that.
Nina gave me a whole bunch of her husband's ties for me to do another one. I didn't do it.
Mm. Yeah. Well, we have time, I think, for a few questions. And you can either, well, I guess you can just shout them out and I'll repeat them if nobody can hear. Anybody have a question? Yes?
Norm, how many pictures do you think you had completed that you would honor as complete in your career?
How many completed paintings have you done?
And do you do like studies for?
No. No, I don't do studies. It's a waste of time. Because I work on a computer and I do all my planning of a painting in Photoshop, so it saves me time. I don't know, my wife will tell you that there are too many paintings in the basement, and I have no idea. I would say there's maybe 120 paintings I've done. And a lot of them I don't have. They're in Air Force museums and in the Pentagon. So that's where they are.
If anybody else has a question, if they could step up to the mic so we can capture the question in the recording, that would be great. Right here? Yeah, thank you.
Anybody else? Here comes somebody, I think. Yeah.
Row.
Hi, Norm.
Hi.
As a fellow artist, I have a question. You're getting older, as I am. Have you ever had a need to do more abstract work? Because
No.
No? That's very interesting because
so ambivalent.
as I got older, it was a force that took over from the realism.
No, I have no desire to experiment. The only thing I experiment is with the subject, or it's like telling a joke. You know, they say, dying is easy, comedy is hard. And I just basically like to come up with a joke, a visual joke, or a curiosity, and that's what I do. And I just paint it. It's like a crafted joke, where a guy like a Buddy Hackett
I got it.
would give a beautiful story and then hit you with the punchline. Here I deliver the punchline and the story at once.
Right.
And that's why I do it.
Got it.
Yeah.
I like, back to your studio thing, you, in the interview, you were talking about how messy your studio was and how compressed, and you said somebody, I don't know, was it the advertising agency told you that a neat stall is the sign of a dead horse?
It's a sign I had in my
Oh,
office.
is it? Okay.
Because my office looked a lot like my studio, or as my wife calls it, atelier. And the guy that I know in the picture of the creative guys, the bald head guy sitting in front of me, was Mr. Neat. Absolutely perfect. Every pencil was lined up. And he was showing me a commercial he just did, because we did Be All You Can Be for the Army. And he wanted my opinion of it. And I said, it's great, but John, you left the logo out. And so, but his desk was very neat.
It's not so much his brain, I guess. Anybody, any other questions? You have to go up there, please.
Come on, Ed.
Much of your 3D work. Could you give us a little talk on that? How you figured that out and what it took?
Well, I've always loved 3D movies, 3D comics, and I'm a critter of media, really I am. And I went online to see how to make a 3D photograph. And if you go online, they're called Anaglyphs with red and green. And it's basically taking a camera, photographing the subject, and moving it 2.5 inches, which is like the distance between the eye, and taking another photograph. And then you merge them in Photoshop by using the filters, the RGB filters, and you do red and green until you get it right, and you move it back and forth till you get a 3D image. And what I do is I take it, get the image, make a JPEG of it, and I just blow it up and I paint it. I just wanted to see if you can actually paint it, because it's very intricate. And some are successful, more successful than others.
But I love in the one out there, I mean, his signature's in 3D too. If you put on the glasses, you'll notice it's all 3D. It's great. Anybody else, somebody else coming up?
Hi, is there a painting that you long for, that you always wanted to do, but you have not? And if there is one, what have kept you hesitant to do it?
Painting of me, I think. No.
Gee, you stumped me. I did want to do a picture of my wife and I, which I did do. It was sitting on a stoop and on the stairs in front of the Salmagundi Club. I had just won a honorable mention, and I took a selfie of the both of us, because it was like an August day, very hot, and I thought this was the perfect picture, and I took it when we were both not spring chickens anymore. And my wife sort of is tepid about the painting, but it's a painting I love. It's the both of us.
All right, well, if there's no more, I would just thank you so much, Norm. It's brilliant work, and great to hear some of your
Well, I thank everybody for
backstories.
coming out. And also, I'm sure you know that Miggs has an incredible, Signs of Compassion at the UN exhibit. And I'm glad he had the time to come out and interrogate me.
Thank you, Phil.
No, but it was terrific. Thank you. Yeah.